Eddie Ho,
Here.
Molly Runquist.
Here.
William Monroe.
Here.
Dennis Ruby.
Here.
Joe Garitano.
Here.
Steve Taylor.
Here.
Good. Everybody's had a chance to review the minutes. Entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from last last meeting. Jack makes the motion. Do I have a second? Dennis, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain. I wasn't here for last meeting.
Do we actually vote, Steve? Do our liaisons actually vote, or are we just?
No, you're non-voting.
Okay.
You're just here for your looks.
Very good. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve to introduce the new council liaison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I speak, however, Travis, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'd like to ask a favor of everyone, if I may. If we could, for Dennis, if we could all speak up. Dennis mentioned to me that he's missing a lot of the conversation, and we want everybody to participate and so forth. So I apologize for the group that, but you know, if we can help Dennis, that would really be great. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we will try. Yes, I have the distinct honor, and it's kind of sad as well. Mr. Manton passed away, as you know, and so the mayor made a couple appointments at the council meeting on Monday, and one of those appointments was Mr. Garitano to replace Mr. Manton as the second council liaison of this commission. So to my left is Mr. Joe Garitano, and I'm going to let him kind of tell you a little bit about himself. He's a distinguished member of council. He's mayor pro tem, and so we're very honored to have him sit on this commission. So, Joe?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. And as Mr. Cross mentioned, Mr. Manton's role here on this committee, it's an honor to be able to take his place here. I knew Mr. Manton from January 2015. Both he and I were appointed together to the city council, and since that time we were, I would say, good friends. We kept in touch, talked often about things, and so therefore I know this is a special seat that I'm sitting in here today. As far as just a little bit about myself, I have been on the council now since 2015, so I serve as the chair for our Admin Public Works Committee. Been doing that for a couple of years. As Mr. Cross mentioned, this is now my second year serving as the mayor pro tem, which basically fills in for the mayor when the mayor is not able to attend the meeting. I've also served on other various committees throughout my tenure here at the city. In addition, I do serve on the board for the Missouri Municipal League. That's a statewide organization. Over 640 cities are part of this organization. So the topic of conversation does come up regarding city-county merger when I'm meeting with officials from other cities. So I feel that that's a great opportunity to make sure that Wildwood has a seat at the table. In fact, I think this may be the first time that Wildwood's ever had a board position at the Missouri Municipal League that I'm aware of. So, so I'm glad to be able to at least have a presence for Wildwood when we look at all the cities that we have throughout the state. But pleased to be here. Been very closely watching what's been talked about with the city-county merger, following along and talking with quite a number of folks. So, glad to serve. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Joe.
Very good. You seeing any comment cards at all?
Nope.
Very good. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat if you'd like to introduce Chris and Josh to the group.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, as everybody knows, in our conversations in the last couple months about one of our focuses with our initiative and our goals to look at the natural resources of Wildwood, especially from an informational perspective. And I was able to, as a stream team member, actually a long-term stream team member, that was the first thing that came to mind, was to engage stream team. And with us today we have Chris Rigger he is the program coordinator for Missouri Stream Team from the Missouri Department of Conservation, and also with him is Josh Ward. And I think Josh's role is much broader, I think, than just watersheds, but he is also with the Missouri Conservation Department as well. And obviously two great resources for us to hopefully, gain some good information from and help us in our information campaign to the residents, and for them to understand just how important those resources are to us and how they could be affected negatively as a result of losing control in a city murder or county murder. So with that, I'll introduce. I actually had a conversation with both Chris and Josh and kind of set them up with what our charter is, the kind of positioning or how we're trying to take this, the natural resource angle, and so they kind of understand what we're here for, what we were appointed for, and but I think there's a lot broader sense of things that they can help us with in terms of the city as well, especially Josh and Chris as well. So whoever would like to introduce you guys and yourself and your roles, and maybe the conversation started.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk to you guys. Pat had initially contacted me, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity, regardless of city-county merger stuff, on what the streaming program might be able to do to help enhance what you guys already have. After talking with Pat, it was pretty apparent to me that while the stream team program is wonderful and has a lot of opportunities, I think what you guys are looking at falls more in line with the work that Josh does in working with cities and municipalities, and I'm not going to step on what he does. So, but there are some things like, how many, do you guys have a line item budget for how much it costs to get rid of tires every year? I mean, that's a big cost for some municipalities after they do cleanups, and most trash can get thrown in the dumpster or recycled, but you can't do that with tires. Dobbs Tire here in the St. Louis region has been a wonderful partner and will take passenger tires free of charge. And so we've had some municipal stream teams take advantage of that to help ease some of their budgets so that they don't have to pay for tire disposal every year. And then there's several of the MS4 requirements that the stream team program can help fulfill. Not all of them, of course, but there are several that you can kind of check the boxes off, and a lot of the municipalities have found that very beneficial as well. But I think that's a very narrow opportunity for the broader thing that you guys are wanting to do. So with that, I'll pitch it to Josh and let him explain what he does. Thank you.
It's nice to see everybody. Thanks for having us tonight. This is my first visit to Wildwood related to natural resources. I was actually here one time before to talk to the city manager and head of parks, I don't know what his title was exactly, about invasive species control around Wildwood. And apparently this was something that was brought up by the mayor a while back, and he was getting a lot of concern from citizens about invasive species control. And so the city actually did a couple of projects within some of their parks, and we provided a little bit of funding to help them do that. I haven't heard much from the city since then. I think we talked about developing a invasive species strategy that would include a lot of other things other than just controlling public land. Unfortunately, that never kind of came to fruition. But anyway, I feel like Wildwood is always, I think you guys are kind of founded on natural resources. And I've always felt like kind of the political will and the public interest is there to really make it a kind of a conservation community. So in my job as a community conservation planner, I'm actually located in Kirkwood. at Potter Valley. That's where my office is. And in kind of a broad sense, I provide technical assistance, funding, and planning assistance to communities for on-the-ground conservation projects or conservation initiatives or conservation-related policies. And doing this all in an effort to conserve natural resources in the urban area and kind of fringe area like some Wildwood is like, and provide opportunities for the public to connect with nature and get all the benefits that go along with that. So that's kind of what I do. It's kind of all over the place. I'm very much a generalist in what I do. But providing assistance to municipalities like Wildwood is definitely something that is within my purview.
So I think, I mean, kind of our primary focus was, and felt that we get the most mileage out of what we're trying to achieve here is our information campaign to the residents of Wildwood. I mean, that's informing them of all these, great resources we have and how important they are to Wildwood and the charter of Wildwood. I mean, are there things that are unique about, our municipality, and that I'm sure there are that from all the municipalities in St. Louis County that you feel we should kind of focus on in terms of that, getting that word out to the residents, and as again, all packaged around, a city-county merger and the types of controls we'll lose to protect those type of resources.
Yeah, so I can't speak too much to the city-county merger. And
Right, yeah.
Outside of what I would focus on, but Wildwood there's a lot of green space here. There's a lot of public land, Rockwood's Reservation, some other state land. So we don't have quite the development density that we do in other areas within St. Louis, and so I think there is a lot of opportunity here to actually preserve natural resources. And I can't speak about any specific features related to natural resources within Wildwood, but I think I'm glad to bring that up because I think one of the best things you can do in the city is actually start by doing natural resource inventory. And I just sent you that stuff today. I know nobody probably had any time to look at it. But Columbia, Missouri did a natural resource inventory, and the Regional Planning Council in Kansas City also did one. And so this is all data that exists out there. It's just a matter of putting it all together and making sense of it. And once you have that natural resource inventory, you can assess the value of the natural resources within whatever area you're wanting to focus on, and then use that information to kind of change your comprehensive plan and make planning and zoning decisions based on that data, that scientific data. So really, I mean, if you're really wanting to conserve natural resources in Wildwood, I think the best approach is to really, go all in with it and do it in a way that you can actually influence the way planning is done and be able to justify that.
Could I ask a question?
Of course.
I mean, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The natural resource, the natural resource, not national, the natural resource inventory, I think, is an interesting idea. Would help with planning and the like, but possibly could give like a rational nexus to why things need to be preserved if, for some reason, there is some sort of merger. But I have a question to you. You mentioned something about resource preservation. So after we do this, that there may be opportunities for resource preservation. So would there be opportunities if we identified an area or a region with low density and it's like, wow, that's really nice, we'd like to preserve that? Is there a role for your agency to create, a park or something, some entity that would, go towards preserving that? Is there a role there for you if we identified?
Not necessarily within the conservation department.
Okay.
I mean, there are land acquisitions, that's
Yeah.
kind of outside of my focus. But that's something that we could talk about if you know, I could pass that along to the appropriate staff, if that's something that Wildwood was interested in.
Well, I mean, Steve, I mean, I thought that maybe we were thinking that if that land acquisition was a question we had, if, I mean, we're not as close to that eventuality as we were when we were discussing this idea, but let's say we are facing a hostile takeover, we're gonna have to cede our authority on things. Is it possible to say, okay, we'll do a land acquisition and create parks which are under the state's control? So I think, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I thought land acquisition might be just the possibility of it, and was something we might want to discuss, but. I mean, if we're going to have a hostile takeover, if we're going to have a merger, I thought the idea was, well, we won't be able to zone, but maybe we could hand off some of our better resources to the state, right? Isn't that something we were interested in?
Protect
it was,
right,
absolutely.
kind of, yeah.
So what does it look like? I mean, I guess the question would be this: what does it look like when the state does a land acquisition of municipalities, green space, or parks?
That's a good question, I have no idea.
Okay.
Because that's just not part of my job. I haven't dealt with that within the St. Louis region yet, so I can figure that out for you, and we can find that information, but I don't have that right now.
I would suspect that the recommendation would probably come down that it would be a city park. And we might be able to help provide some management or some expertise on that. I can't, like Josh, I can't speak for sure, but I would suspect it would be more open to being able to assist on at a local level and to maintain local control.
Not in the market is what you're saying.
Well, there is that too.
May not be. I mean, we're going through, as an agency right now, we're going through a infrastructure inventory process. So it's, we're trying to figure out what we have right now.
Exactly.
So I doubt they're looking to acquire new property. But I don't know. And I could ask the appropriate people if that's something you really want to do.
You've got two people here, it's way above our pay grade.
Well, it's a question we would, I think, like the answer to, because again, the doomsday scenario that we were once looking at seems less and less likely. However, in the event that we have to hand it off to somebody, having the prerogative of who we're handing it off to is very important to us.
I mean, there are, you know, conservation easements and land trusts, those type of things. I don't know how the city-county merger would affect something like that, if that would stand through that process. I'm not sure about that, but that may be something to look into.
Thank you for spending your evenings with us, Josh and Chris. And as we were saying before, we were facing a very unhappy ending to the whole thing. And I don't know if you fellas were following this togetherness proposal that was made, but what essentially was going to do, well, let me back up for a minute. The city of Wildwood was founded for one reason and one reason alone, and that was zoning, period. And before the incorporation of Wildwood, it was controlled by St. Louis County Planning and Zoning. And to say they were dishonest would be a compliment to them. Many of the members were land developers themselves. The head of it was in partnership with the lawyer who was bringing most of these land use cases before them. So what was happening was that the zoning was just indiscriminate out here. And you're right in saying that the residents of Wildwood value conservation, very much so. We embrace this and we want to maintain it. So when we saw what was happening, we formed a city, which they fought and they tried to stop. And a judge finally had to say, look, you can't do it. You're violating state law. And so anyway, here we are, and this onerous proposal failed because of the corruption and because it was just an arrogant approach to the whole thing. So we're looking to anybody and everybody who can help us protect this environment that we love so dearly out here. And so anything that you can do would be great. And I understand that, Josh, you're with the Department of Conservation?
Yes, sir.
And Chris, are you as
Yes.
well? I think I'm right in saying that the Missouri Conservation Department was named #1 in the country several years running, if not right now. And you fellows do a marvelous job, so naturally we were looking to you for some help.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if we're #1, but we definitely get a lot of help just because of the citizens of Missouri and the fact that they wrote in a sales tax for us years back. And that's really where a lot of our capacity comes from, the money is 1% sales tax. So, you know, we're as good as we are because the citizens of Missouri support conservation overwhelmingly. So, you know, as far as preserving land, and we don't have much of a regulatory capacity.
Mhm.
You know, it more revolves around providing assistance, whether it be technical assistance, funding, those kind of things. You know, I came into this meeting, and I sent Patrick this as well, the Conservation Planning Tools Manual, but a lot of that revolves around planning and zoning and ordinances and incorporating conservation and all those things. So if that's something that would fall apart, I guess, in the city-county merger, maybe that's not as much interest to you guys.
Can you speak to that a little more? That I mean, it's a big document. I just got free time to look at it since I got it, but today. But
Yeah.
the whole you know, program behind this. I guess it's recent. It's just published. The conservation planning tools.
Yeah, it was just published, and we actually just had a training. They did a series of trainings around the state, and we had one last month, I believe, up in Maryland Heights. And it's geared towards, the audience is city and county planners. And it really just it's a reference manual to show them how characteristics of conservation communities and how you can you know, incorporate conservation considerations into your planning, you know, your planning and zoning and ordinances and all those kind of policies. So it's not like it's not going to tell you exactly what to do with everything, but it really gives you a good starting point and shows planners how they can use conservation in their planning. I don't have much more to say about that. I mean, I think if we had enough interest, unfortunately at the training we had no planners there. So I'm not sure why. I don't know what kind of job they did promoting it, but there were several people there, but no specific city planners were there at the training, unfortunately.
No, keep going, I'm just letting him know that when I ask a question when appropriate.
So, I mean, I would suggest looking through this briefly. I mean, you don't have to look through the whole thing. A lot of it's information that you probably don't need to know. But it really does focus around comprehensive plan and planning and zoning ordinances and design and development codes and those kind of things. So if that's, I think that would be good for Wildwood to look at that stuff. And I think you guys do have some of those things like stream setback ordinances and tree preservation ordinances already in place. And you guys may have had some sort of weed ordinance that I think that may have been one you redid as well. So it's a great resource either way, but as far as protecting you from the city-county merger, I don't know if that's necessarily the answer.
One thing that we can also provide that Patrick kind of mentioned or alluded to is education. We've got a lot of resources to help you guys educate your citizens on what happens to our streams and our communities when they go from these green spaces into a more suburban or urban development. You know, why are suddenly my stream banks falling in and I've got high dollar property that's being threatened, and that whole process, those are things that we can assist with or talk to, and we've got also technical assistance on that kind of stuff that we can provide guidance. The kicker is if you start getting into high dollar property, meaning anything with a roof on it essentially, or roads or something like that, we kind of, from liability issue, kind of step back a little bit, but can at least provide information on the mechanics on why it's happening. And provide some information on Well, you might want to look at doing X, Y, and Z, one of which is probably consulting an engineer, because this may be an engineering fix. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that the water's not infiltrating like it used to, and it's running off, and you've got more water hitting those stream channels at a higher rate. And so it's eating away at the banks, and then it's in somebody's front yard, backyard, or one of the roads, or eating away one of the bridges, which then costs the community more money to then have to deal with. So if you can, as Josh talked about before, that preservation aspect, if you can head that off before it gets to that point, it's a whole lot cheaper. How you do that is really depends on the situation and what kind of means you've got at your disposal.
And as far as the information campaign and the education that you guys are talking about, I think we could provide you with any kind of information you need as far as how the importance of preserving watersheds and those kind of things. I think a lot of people don't know that once you get into a watershed and you get 10% impervious surface, the streams start degrading, and that's all it takes. Really, So communicating that kind of information out to the public would be good, and that's something that we can definitely help you with.
That's one of the things that the Stream Team program does, is teaches water quality workshops so that the citizens can actually take that training, learn about it, receive equipment to actually monitor, and getting ahead of the game and being able to figure out what's going on prior to development can be a huge asset. Most of the time it's something bad has already happened, and now how do we deal with it, as opposed to getting ahead of it and going, well, we've got something really good here, maybe we should start prioritizing where we are focusing our efforts and our money. And by our, I'm the third person, meaning you guys as the municipality, which is another good community involvement kind of campaign, possibly to get the citizens involved in that kind of stuff, because it sounds like that most of the people here would be behind that. So,
Steve?
I wanted to drill down a little bit further, if I may, gentlemen, with regards to erosion that you were talking about. Josh, you started, and then Chris, you kind of chimed in. The city has recently formed an erosion task force, and I'm involved in that. And it is comprised of residents from each of the 8 wards. And we're just getting traction, just starting. As you know, here in Wildwood, we have multiple watersheds that go in different directions towards the Missouri River, Merrimack River, et cetera. And we have many creeks and stream beds, Cox Creek being one of them. So we are experiencing a lot of erosion issues, just as you were speaking. Primarily in people's backyards, and so it's eating away. There's, the frequency and the volume of water that's going down, it seems to be, much greater than it was in years past. Josh, in particular, you mentioned funding. You said the word funding as you were describing about erosion and so forth. Are you suggesting that there is funding available through the Conservation Department to help municipalities like Wildwood to deal with existing erosion to try to mitigate that and so forth? Might you have been suggesting that?
Well, as far as like stream bank stabilization and restoration, in developed areas, that's something we typically don't get into. We will work on those things in more of our priority geographies that are relatively unimpacted by development. Now, if you want to talk about implementing green infrastructure to avoid that increased volume of water going into your creeks, that's something we could definitely provide funding for.
Okay. Do you have information that you would be able to send to me relative to that?
Yeah. We have several different programs. The TRIM program, which is through our forestry division, I think.
We just applied for a TRIM grant.
Yeah. Cost share funding, which is most of Wildwood within the U.S. Census definition of urbanized, or does anybody know?
I'm not familiar with the census definition.
Right.
We have different areas of
Between urban, suburban, and commercial,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
But we have some cost share programs, and we also have a couple of grant programs that can potentially help.
Okay. If you don't mind, I certainly would like to see what information you have relative to all of that. as we go down the road, related to either, and if mitigating the existing erosion is something that's outside your purview, but if green plantings and so forth to help to try to slow down the erosion or something like that, and there's funding for that, certainly. But we know that, you just can't pile a bunch of boulders where there's a big washout, because that affects upstream, downstream, and that sometimes makes matters worse. So anyway, I know this is kind of an aside for everyone, but it's important to the city that, since we just started this task force. So Josh, if you could send, I'll give you my card, and if you could send me some information on that, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah. The funding specifically, or?
Anything related to, from the funding, from the grants, to anything related to erosion.
Okay, all right.
That's a hot topic right now.
Okay.
Got a question for you, Chair. So, first meeting here, so I apologize if I stated something, and I was trying to follow when you first started here. So back to kind of what we're looking for as far as how do we protect Wildwood. If I heard correctly, right now you're not in the business, right, of acquiring new land, or?
I can't answer that for sure.
Okay.
That would be my guess, but I would have to ask, I would have to pass that up the chain and figure out if that's the case or not.
So if, assuming you were, assumption that, you are, like, for example, Prairie Fork was a donation not too long ago, right? That was private land. So if you were still acquiring, and I'm sure there's probably financial aspects of it, of whether they can continue to support it and budget it for it and all, we would obviously work with you to set up that, kind of transfer or dedication of land.
Yeah.
And then would the Department of Conservation then be the one be fully responsible for maintaining it, preserving it? Is that typically how you work? Or do you work more in partnership?
It's typically, with land acquisitions, it's when we acquire land, it's a conservation area, it's fully under conservation state ownership, and you're responsible for the management of it. I don't, we may have a couple of community assistance programs where we help to manage boat ramp areas with municipalities. I don't know of any examples where we're actually managing large areas of land in cooperation with the city. But that said, like we said, we do have technical assistance where we can provide a forest management plan or potentially funding to help manage those natural areas.
And usually when you acquire land, it's protected, right? It's going to be preserved for eternity, I guess, of the land, right? It's not like you're going to do something with it. Usually there's a dedication forever wild or for a certain use or something like that.
Yeah.
Based on what you've seen, I know you may not have the right answers.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that, but I don't know of us selling land to develop on.
Yeah,
not to
it'd probably be
develop.
contrary to what your
Right, yeah.
mission is. So there's that, and then you did touch on something that I had heard of, and there are certainly like land trust and dedications, but you typically, do you stay on those, or is that something you work with?
I have not worked with that yet, since I've been in this position. It's been about 2 years now. But I could be a good point of contact initially, and I'll have to figure out, that's kind of why we wanted to come here without any sort of prepared presentation, because I'm gonna have to go find some of this information for you guys. And it seems as though land acquisition and preservation is a primary focus here, so I'm gonna have to go back and figure out, get this information for you guys. And, I could come back and give you a presentation on it, or we could have another conversation.
It might be uncharted territory for you. I mean, you
Right.
probably haven't done something like this before, but it's not that it's not possible. We could, there could be discussions and, maybe some kind of arrangement.
Yeah.
But, so that's something that I guess could be kept on the table just as a consideration.
Okay.
At this point, it sounds like, and again, the committee knows more about the history. I'm just asking questions here just to understand more of how you all work with municipalities and areas throughout the state.
One of the things that Josh mentioned, which I don't know how many of you heard, was the opportunity for conservation easements.
Yeah.
Which, again, it depending on the situation, it sets aside land for protection, but we don't actually take ownership of it. So it's whoever the landowner, we do this quite a bit for stream stabilization projects. They'll go in, the landowner then has to put it in either a perpetual easement or a 30-year easement or something along those lines where they've got to plant all these trees and then for that period of time can't go back in there and take them out. And you can probably speak more to that than I can.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those, we may help them with the stream stabilization work and riparian corridor restoration, but the easements are usually done through a land trust organization.
Yeah.
I don't think we administer any sort of easements that I know of.
No, but I think we help people navigate
Yeah.
those muddy waters of how to get through the paperwork and stuff.
Ozark Regional Land Trust would be one of those examples. They're someone we've worked with
Yeah.
a lot in our priority watershed up in Shoal Creek area.
Good point, good point.
So Ozark Regional is one.
Ozark Regional Land Trust. I don't know if they would do easements up here or not, but there are other land trust organizations, and that's something I can.
More to help us, I guess, we could look into seeing how they're set up over there and how they're protected, that trust over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if that works for us to potentially consider here.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're looking for, all the different avenues that we could pursue to protect, the land.
And that's something I can look into as well. Various land trust organizations that might be appropriate for the wildlife.
Are there state protections with those? Like,
I don't.
in terms of, all right.
I think it's more of a contract that it's a legally binding, you
Yeah.
can't do certain activities.
Well,
That's a mechanism.
that's it, that's exactly it.
Our agency's not one of the people.
I think Patrick makes a good point that whatever option we pursue, we have to make sure that it has protections above the area here. If there was a supposed merger,
Yeah.
it has to be state or something exceeding the local authority.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not as familiar with this being from outside of St. Louis. So if the city zoned or set aside something, a tract of land, and this merger went through, that could then be repealed? Is that the? Wow, okay.
Yeah, planning and zoning would be decided by the new metropolitan city. So therefore, downtown would be making those decisions. So it could be potential rezonings, parks will be retained by the local municipalities as far as being managed. I don't know the detail, maybe the committee has talked about this before, whether or not the parks would have any control from the metro city. But they have said, based on that last proposal, that the parks would be maintained by whatever remains behind from the city or the municipal district.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Parks and trash. Everything else is
Yeah.
planning and zoning, which basically defines Wildwood in terms of what we allow to be developed or not developed, and everything going back to 1995 would be completely taken out of the hands of the municipality, of all the municipalities. And as Mr. Garitano just said, that function for this entire metro city would be controlled by a metro mayor and a 33-person council downtown that wouldn't care, about taking a Highway 109 and turning it into a 6-lane highway, a north-south, trying to connect 44 to 40 or something like that. So we would lose everything. So what we would retain would basically just picking up the trash in the park.
And a good chance too is, although we know Wildwood is, I think, about 68 square miles, there are over 80 municipalities in the county.
they're proposing that there'll only be about 30-something municipal districts. So it's very likely we would maybe be combined with one of the others, more than one or more of the others that are by us, because they're taking 88, bringing it down to 33. Yeah, they're kind of shells of governments, because the only things that they do would be pertaining to parks and the trash, so.
Yeah, but what little they leave us, they're eventually gonna take over, like a vine, they're gonna take over eventually everything else.
That could be, yeah, I mean, we don't know. The proposal at this time only had said that would stay behind. They didn't mention anything as far as schools and other
Yeah.
things, but those could all be looked at too at some point.
But I think it's worth noting, though, I mean, we're kind of back to talking the doom and gloom, but as the chair pointed out, as Mr. Taylor pointed out, things have changed significantly. I mean, as recent as today, for those of you who don't know, it was reported in the Business Journal that the executive director, Nancy Rice, resigned today from the Better Together coalition. So one more person who wants no part of this. So I think, I think one could look at that and say, certainly the likelihood of this merger going forward in what was proposed before, which would do what we've just talked about, is becoming less and less likely. But again, that's why we've said at the last meeting, and we'll say at each meeting, we need to remain vigilant, because some potential merger still could happen. But it seems that it may not be a statewide vote, and it could be only the folks that are. So I think it is safe to say we can somewhat breathe a sigh of relief that things have changed significantly over the last few weeks. I mean, other than today's announcement, I mean, there has not been anything in the media for weeks now. So I don't believe that it's as dire as it once was. We still need to continue doing all this kind of stuff, but I think potentially we can maybe start moving away from saying, we're going to lose all planning and zoning and so forth. That's because as each day goes by, I think that's becoming less and less likely, in my opinion, and from what we can see in terms of what's happening in that coalition.
You know what happened, Steve, is they watched our live feed and they got so scared that they just.
Mr. Chair, you run a pretty tough group here, so I think it's you're the one that's scared.
They're headed for the hills.
So thank you, Mr. Monroe. I appreciate that.
The one thing you did say, Chris, I thought was of particular interest is when we think about the educational value. I think if we were to recommend in our final report to the council that they think about strategic acquisition of land in order to then maybe construct more conservation easements that prevent development outside what we'd like to see in a watershed. The other piece that you touched on, though, that's more immediate is the educational piece. And one of the things you said was, helping us and aiding in educating the community about the value of the things that we have. And I think that's probably the biggest, most immediate value that I can see in partnership would be, as we go through this educational piece, letting the community know how unique Wildwood really is and how those things are of value. And when you have things of value, generally you inherently want to protect them. So that in and of itself, from a posturing of the political and personal perception of our residents of this is really something worth protecting and we'll go to the wall to protect it, it is probably of greatest value in the immediate near term. So what does that typically look like when you're coming in from an educational partnership perspective with the municipality, and how might we get something like that going?
That's a good question. It's not something that I've had the opportunity to do yet, at least not at the municipal level that you guys are talking about, not at that scale. However, we've got some established educational classes and materials already developed that we can help provide you to distribute. Would be happy to give presentations, or we usually do our introductory level workshops down or up the road at Battler State Park. So we almost every year have 2 entry level workshops just right here in your backyard. that's open to any citizen. So as those opportunities come up, and that's just within the Stream King program, we have an entire outreach and education division that's kind of what they do. And that includes working with schools to help educate the kids and then incorporate that stuff into curriculum, providing you guys the information that you can then pass on to your citizens or help, you know, like I said, put forth either presentations or, you know, little mini workshops or something like that.
So you talked about taking an inventory of natural resources that we have as a city. Would we then, once we have an inventory of our resources, be able to tailor something specific for Wildwood and maybe host it within one of our municipal buildings and invite the residents to come in and have a discussion with you about these are the unique natural resource elements of your specific municipality? And would we be able to tailor something like that?
I think so. I think that would be great. I mean, I think it'd be awesome if Wildwood would develop a natural resource inventory. I mean, I think you'd probably be the first in the St. Louis region to do that. And it would come in handy, I think, later beyond just the educational value of it. And that's, I think, if you guys are interested in doing that, I think we should get the regional planning council involved in that. I think they can provide assistance with gathering the data and putting together something like that, similar to what Mark did in Kansas City.
Josh and Chris, one thought I'd like to leave with you folks is that this plan, I don't know how familiar either one of you are, and I'm not speaking down to you, of this Better Together plan was. But at the very minimum, it was a very daring plan. It would eradicate every municipality in the county, and they would take control of most assets, but we leave the debt with the municipality. So they, taking care of parks could become a real financial strain. While this plan that they had did crumble because of the corruption with Stinger and that sort of thing, the genesis for that still lives in the state of Missouri. The man who started that is still here. He's still well-funded. He will still try to make changes. And the ideas that he's coming up with could run contrary to what the Conservation Department thoughts are. And you guys should be aware that there's this kind of thinking going on and get out in front of the wave, if you will, to be prepared, because it could show up anywhere in the state again, and probably will. So
Yeah.
I just want to leave that with you.
I have no doubt it would go against a lot of the things that we try to work towards. Unfortunately, as an agency, we don't have that regulatory capacity to tell people what to do.
Right.
We work with people. That's on the local governments. And it's within their responsibility to take those steps, but we can help them do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's to your benefit not to take sides at this point, but to be aware of the way the tide's going.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No, I can't take sides.
I joke with my wife, I'm a state employee, I'm not allowed to have my own decision.
No political views.
That's right.
She's got enough for you anyway.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
Very good. Any questions for gentlemen? Thank you both for being here.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking your time. And we'd definitely be interested in the follow-up items as far as conservation easements, the land trust, and the potential resource inventory.
Yeah, I'll put together a little, some recommendations for you guys and some information and send it over. And if there's something you want to do beyond that, like another meeting, just let us know.
I like that idea of the natural resources inventory. I think that sounds really important.
Yeah, it really is the first step. I mean, knowing what you have. And then you can even, kind of assess those natural resources, put a value on them, and prioritize
Yeah.
based on that. Speaking of priorities, do you guys have kind of priority areas that you're wanting to preserve? Is there certain areas that you're thinking about, or is it just?
It's the entire,
Wildwood as a
it's
whole?
Wildwood as a whole.
Okay. Right.
If you think about losing local control from the zoning capacity and the effect it could have, there's nothing stopping a metro city from redistricting all or part of Wildwood as an industrial zone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very little that anybody here could do to stop that from occurring, or taking our 3+ density and narrowing it down to, less than an acre density. I mean, those types of things. So as we look at the angles we approach this through, we're learning a lot of great value in archaeological studies value and this resource inventory may be a positive byproduct of the work we're doing here, but all along, we want to really understand what tools are in our inventory, what, I don't want to use a weapon term, but how can you arm yourself with poison pills to preserve what you value about the community? So.
Yeah, I would recommend in the meantime, checking out the conservation planning tools manual, even though it doesn't necessarily apply to what you're wanting to do with to protect yourself from the city county merger. And then those two examples of the natural resource inventories from Columbia and then Mark in Kansas City. Right. Just get a general idea of what to talk about.
So, as Josh had mentioned, he had provided me earlier this afternoon, not only the conservation planning tool, but also links to some of these resources and documentation. I'll share that out to the team this evening.
Josh, do you have a card?
I do, yeah.
That's my card. I would like to get some of that stuff on that funding and all the grants and so forth, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys again for coming out. And Chris, I know you're going back to Jeff City tonight, I assume, so.
Just another day in the office.
Well, I should love to stay and listen. I mean, this is a very impactful.
I have information on how Stream Team program can fit some of those minimum control measures for MS4 permits. I'd be happy to leave this with you if it would be of value. If it's not, I'll take it back. I don't know.
I think it would be, and we can enter it in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Steve, were there resource links on the website that even identify organizations like Missouri Stream Team?
Probably not currently, but certainly can be done very easily. But we'll get this, we can scan this in and
I can
then
send those
it
to you
the team.
electronically if you would.
I was
if
gonna
you
say,
would
we can do that with us.
Okay.
You know, we can scan it in and then send it out electronically to the
Okay.
team.
I'll leave this hard copy for whoever.
That'd be great.
It's appropriate for.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thanks for
having us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.
I actually commend you for being as forward thinking as you are on that, because getting ahead of the curve is, it's a lot better than playing catch up.
Yep.
I can see Wildwood becoming the model conservation community. Just keep that in mind, you guys can be the model.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
you.
you.
So next on our agenda is the archaeological study that Steve had done some work on. I know that we've engaged the study, but I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Okay, sorry I missed the last meeting, had a conflict. So I did meet with Archaeological Research Center with their president and senior specialist. They've done work for the city before. It's a very interesting conversation. There are a lot of archaeological and historical resources in Wildwood. What I learned was that along Cox Creek, it's replete with archaeological sites. They showed me a map. A lot of those sites aren't known because they're sort of kept quiet so people don't go and dig at night and that sort of thing. There's sort of good news, bad news with it. There are laws that protect archaeological sites. There are laws that protect historic grave sites, and we have a ton of historic grave sites, not even just the ones we know like Old Slave Road and that, but according to state law, this is my understanding, anything that's been on a historic map is a historic grave site, and there are some protections. Those protections, though, aren't ironclad. They're protections like, well, you will have to move, if it is known, you will have to move all of the bodies, all of the markers somewhere else when you develop. Mr. Harlow impressed upon me that even though that's the law, it's not really done a lot, and it's really sort of, if it's hands-off by the municipality, developers are supposed to self-report bones and things, but he said you'd be surprised at how often developers just don't see those things. You know, it just happens a lot.
Yeah.
And he was showing me some maps and historical maps, and there's a lot of stuff. So I provided a memo. Basically, the first thing, you know, he noted Wildwood is replete with archaeological sites, both known and potential. 2, there are historic grave sites that have some legal protection, and I described Missouri laws, but how well they're enforced. There are certain grants. 3, there are certain grants that are available to provide for archaeological investigation. So, for example, at the community park, there was some artifacts, art flakes found, and then there was an investigation. Well, these guys don't work for free, you know, they have to be funded. So there are certain grants that we can get as a city that we could go prospectively and look at their maps and say, oh, we think this is a hot spot. And if we find it, then possibly there could be, you know, a designation given to that site. There are many recorded archaeological sites in this area. Actually, there's the Bonham Creek Archaeological District. It's actually given a name. There are so many sites. There's a known mound near Atherton Road and Wild Horse Creek, and that's on private land, but there's just tons of stuff. He also said that if Army Corps starts working in Cox Creek, that might trigger some funds that are available to look for sites, you know. So what he has suggested, the first step is, and he suggested, and Steve, did we accept their offer yet, or are we considering?
I have their offer, but I haven't signed it yet.
Yeah, you haven't signed it.
fully intend to, but I wanted to hear
Okay,
your
so
presentation.
this is what they are suggesting, and I was really surprised. So there are already known sites, historic and prehistoric. They would be willing to, when the city gives them our maps, the parcel maps, whatever, they're willing to do an archival search and give us a report on everything that is in the city and coordinate it with a map. And then we know what is there. And so it is looking at what is known. This is not digging any dirt. It's just like, let's look through the literature, let's look through the maps, we'll put it together, and they will give it to the city. They would prefer, so here's the thing, I mean, it's known, but it's not really available, right? So a lot of us don't know it. So, because the archaeologists are such that they like to encourage people to report, but then they keep it quiet. You know, it's very interesting, you know. I belong to the Archaeological Historical Society. I'm not very active, but I get their journals, and they say it's site such and such, and they give a letter and a number. And you really don't know what they're talking about, you know. You would have to call the and they're not going to give you that information unless you've got good reason to know, because they don't want you going with a shovel and start digging stuff. You know, the farmers don't want that or anything. So they have a lot of information. They're willing to give it to us for the city to use and to know. They would prefer us not to put it on our website. That's the one thing, you know, like
Right.
like there's a lot of, you know, so people go start up, you know, digging mounds, because there's already an agreement with the people who own the Atherton mound that they wouldn't publish that information, right? So he came in with a price and a bid, and it was given to you, what was it, $2,700?
$2,700,
Yeah, that's a pretty good.
That seems like a good deal.
Oh my gosh.
That's an amazing.
And that's like the starting point. So
Yeah.
then, even if we don't use it, I think it's a good thing for the city to
I
have,
think it's a great
right?
thing for the city to have.
Yeah, so,
100%.
No, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
If it helps us, great, but if it doesn't, it's something that we will use in the
Well,
city.
it's like the natural resources inventory,
Yeah,
having that kind of information for us. I mean, that's our brand, that's what we are, you know. nature conservation, history, you know, to have that information would be essential, just to have it on hand, for no
Yeah,
other reason, just to know.
so the prehistoric ones are harder to find, right? But there was, you know, there are mastodon sites, not necessarily in Wildwood, but across from the Butterfly House, Boston Park. So there's people been here for about 20,000 years. But there was a big, there's about, you know, from the 1400s, everyone kind of left. So there's more prehistoric than historic tribes, you know, like, you know, Ray would always talk about the Osage. Well, I wonder if they were there, but we're in what was called a zone of avoidance. It's interesting. You should talk to them sometime. But there are 20,000 years worth of people burying stuff around here. We have a lot of sites, especially in Wildwood. We're known for it. Even Pleistocene bones have been coming out of Cox Creek. I mean, sort of like bones from the Ice Age pop up in Cox Creek here and there. And it's not, that doesn't have so much archaeological significance, but there's a lot of stuff around here. So I think $2,700 to know, and then possibly look at some grants. Then if we find something nice, let's say it's not impossible that if we look at it and we want to spend, you know, a little bit of money to look somewhere, I mean, we could end up finding something nice and build a park around it, and that's a way to preserve something. And this conservation, it might even fit into the conservation easement thing, which I thought was the best news I heard, that maybe there was not the state, but some other entity we could engage in a legal agreement to. And so that's my report, that's all I got. But I was very encouraged at $2,700 for that type of information.
Yeah, living in Wildwood is more than just a city. It's a culture, it's a mindset. It really is. Most people live here because they enjoy the environment. And I had a friend who taught American history for 30 years, and his conclusion was that history's wasted on the young. He said people really don't get interested in history until they get some history themselves. And the kind of culture that we have in our city would really lend itself to this kind of thing. I started kind of doing a survey and photographing old barns. I just ran out of gas on the thing. Is these old barns are disappearing, and it's part of our culture. It'll be 100 years from now to have photographs of these things. It's significant, it really is. And to have a documentation of the historic and prehistoric following of our city, I think is neat. I think it's fascinating. We really should go after this, you know, with both feet, and because it's a part of what we are, the kinds of people we are. And so that's it.
Good work. Interesting.
Lending itself into that, I mean, without giving longitudes and latitudes, we certainly can take some of the.
Right, oh, sure.
pieces
No,
and
no,
say-
And you can find these bones
Yeah,
at.
no, I talked to him
The
about
secret
that.
society.
You know, it's sort of like.
It's a shame we don't have pirates. You know, with buried treasure.
These guys are as secretive as those people that have, what is it, morel mushrooms or something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean,
They were the
you do not
They get you a little bit.
give out those locations.
What's that?
And people will shoot you for that.
Yeah.
What?
I said this secret society about these bones, it's almost like the people that go and have their morel mushrooms.
Yeah, oh,
Man,
So there was one other point I wanted to
Joking
make.
about morels.
About
Be
that.
joking about morels.
Seriously. There's a lot of sites along Cox Creek proper
Right.
are on the map, their map. Up on the tributaries, not so much, and I asked them why. They said, well, because they haven't put in these sewer lines yet, you know? So a lot of these were found when they put in sewer lines too. So there's a lot of unknown, I mean, he's like, are there some there? I mean, I was talking to him about it. Yeah, I bet you there. I mean, pretty much, yes. You can find it. So it's interesting conversation.
Well, as Jack said, history is very fascinating.
Oh, it really is.
To really
yeah.
just see where we came from.
Yeah, in the pages of history lie our future. It really does, no question about it.
Dalton era, in case you want to look it up, Google it, Dalton era sites. And these were more than just campsites. Dalton era looked like people were living there in the Dalton period along Cox Creek. And that's pretty far back. Pretty far. Just Google it, Dalton, D-A-L-T-O-N. And I brought him some, he identified one thing from 5,000 years ago, just a flake, and one other about 8,500.
Really?
They're all over. You know, they don't necessarily look like much unless you know what you're looking for.
Is that something you pulled out of community park?
I showed
No
them some of that
comment.
stuff, yeah.
Well,
So
we plan on executing that document. I was just waiting, I just wanted to have you
Yeah.
group benefit of.
Done. I'll stop talking now. Don't mention archaeology and ask me to give a report.
So Will, where are you finding these mushrooms?
Right near the ginseng. North sides of hills under elm trees, right? That's where they're supposed to be. My wife is pretty passionate about it.
Really?
She gets pretty aggressive. She was out there 9 months pregnant this year doing it, so that tells you anything.
So can we have dinner over at your house sometime?
We gotta wait till spring again. They're done and gone now, but yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That stuff sells for,
It's
I
a
don't
friend
know,
of
it's
mine.
like $40 a pound or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like truffles. I mean, they're
Really?
yeah,
I've never had one.
very good. What's that?
I said this year was a good year for
It was a very good year.
You go into Queens Park areas and stuff like that? No, can't say.
No, the north sides of the hills under elm trees.
I don't eat
Creek
mushrooms.
beds,
I don't eat mushrooms because, that's the experts. One bad mushroom.
I will say Babbler, it's actually great. There's several places in Babbler that you'll find in the springtime along the bed there that
Really?
you'll find. So very good. So next up, we have Molly, who very graciously put together our survey. We made some changes to it after the reflection feedback from Steve and Joe at last meeting that we should probably tailor it more specifically and directly towards the merger question. So this is a product of what we got and the changes made. Looks great to me. What feedback do we have from the group?
I think that the opening paragraph is really good. I mean, it's non-threatening,
Yeah.
but it lets the people, it's informing, the residents of Wildwood what is out there. Because a lot of people are not aware of, the merger or what things been happening, but this is very informative, and it's not taking sides, and
Yeah.
it's just well placed.
Will wrote that up, and then sent it to me, I guess, and Steve, and then I just tweaked a tiny bit because I did want to make sure we didn't have any language in there that sounded like we were talking a little earlier, like doomsday and
Right.
Yeah.
adverse and this and that. We don't want to, I think, present it. We want to be
No, you guys did a really, really good
You know.
job in keeping it neutral.
neutral and informative. So I think Will did a great job with that opening paragraph. So thank you, Will. And then just kind of made each of those kind of choices as far as the survey questions a little bit more specifically, like what do you mean by parks and trails, or what do you mean by the community events and this kind of stuff. So we added a little bit more detail to that. And then, and Joe, since this is the first time you've been here, so then the idea is that this would be put out electronically, like in the e-newsletter or on the website, so that the marketing team would make it, use some kind of like a Survey Monkey or something. So it really wouldn't probably look exactly like this.
Mhm.
But, so what do you guys, think it looks okay?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's great.
Great.
Yeoman's work.
Okay.
So with that then, I guess if we can entertain a motion to recommend to the council and the city that we propagate this out to the residents and record the responses and provide it, and is the first sort of informational recommendation of the committee.
I'll make a motion to do that. Is that how you're supposed to do
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Very good. Since it's an official vote, okay, very good. Jack, Paul, everyone write down for the second. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good.
All right, that question though, once I say the survey comes back, what happens then? What do we do with it without saying better together means we lose local control, we say, or that we don't have our own police department? Do we say that at some point, or what?
I think it becomes just more good information to have, you know, like here's our archaeological sites, here's our conservation inventory, here's what matters most to Wildwood residents. You know, maybe just hold on to that information, just have that information so that then we can say X number of residents responded to this survey and, you know, this is what matters to them the most. And, you know, if it's zoning and land usage, that's a big thing, you know, regarding any potential merger. If it's town center, probably not so merger impacted, you know. If it's the green spaces and streams and natural areas, that probably could be really impacted. So I just think it's good information just to have in case we do get another merger proposal.
I think it could direct our efforts as well as to, you know, what are the things most interested in preserving? Where should we direct our fire?
Right.
And that gets into, you know, so I'm going to back up for just a moment, and then I'm going to answer your question, Paul. First of all, as we discussed, we can create a survey monkey, and this can go out on our website and gather that information. In addition to that, though, I think we want to have a lot of the copies, and we want to have these available, you know, next Friday at the next concert, okay, and have them at the booth for people to fill out, or at the farmers market, or those kinds of things. And in the city events, you might want to do this. But let's go back to what we talked about in terms of why we're doing something like this. Information about why did people move to Wildwood, as I said at the last meeting about what do you like about Wildwood, we have all of that information. We've been gathering that information for years, so we know what people like and don't like. That's how we run the city. That's how we do our planning. That's how we develop our events, so we know what people like and why they're here. So one of the benefits, Paul, that this does is it's education. It just, even if we don't do anything with the information itself, as Molly said, it's good information to have that if we need to use it in terms of a push back, if you will. But if nothing else, it just got our citizens, our residents, who may not be familiar with what's going on with this Better Together plan.
Or they think it's dead and gone.
Or they think it's dead and gone. It just forces them to think and say, whoa, I had no idea. You would be surprised how many people out there still do not know about this initiative. There's quite a few people out there. So just getting this in the hands of people and having them aware, just be aware and be thinking about this, that's a win right there, much less retaining this information. So this document serves a lot of purposes.
I'm looking at this here, I just got a couple of questions or pieces of feedback. So just, and you may have discussed this already, but the first paragraph there. So in January, an organization called Better Together proposed a merger. I think we want to be clear, they didn't propose, they proposed a ballot initiative that would then be voted by the citizens across the state. So that, you might want to clarify that, because then it would ultimately be voted on at that time by the citizens across the state. So it might be a little bit of a technicality, but you know, for accuracy, you may want to wordsmith that, and I can suggest that. But in number 2, one category that I don't see here is around municipal services, public works, you know, police, fire, school.
Well, we've got,
Is that under one of them?
It's more under one.
it's up under 1.
Local, oh, it's under one.
So the way we broke it down, Joe, is that the first 7 items up there are number 1. those are things that really every community has. Every community has police, every community has schools, every community has some parks, every community has cost of living, you know, houses to buy. Whereas then the 7 items in the second question are things that are really very specifically unique to Wildwood.
Okay, I see what you mean by that. So you're saying number 2 is just unique to Wildwood.
In regards to, you know, like the very distinct land use designations, all of the outdoor activities we have, all of the green spaces that we have, the town center. You know, these are things that every municipality really doesn't have. So that's how they're kind of broken down that way.
So at the top, in question number 1, how do we rate? I'm sure people just don't buy a house because Wildwood has the best snow removal. And then, no offense to Rick, I actually do a good job. But, I mean, it is, I'm just wondering, how do we factor municipal services? Because that's a proposal that will be taken away.
Yeah.
And so when I talk with people, you know, around the area today, you know, I have the ability to address a pothole issue, and the city staff is outstanding within 24 hours sometimes. They make me look good, actually. I always joke around. Or trash pickup, when there's problems, they will address it right away.
Yeah, maybe not trash
I
pickup.
said trash
Yeah,
pickup
don't
might
talk
not be
about
one we want to
It's
highlight.
not-
right
yeah,
now.
So you know, that's something that I believe will be impacted. Because now, when you're looking at a metropolitan city, they're going to prioritize where the help needs to go.
Right.
So if there are areas that have been neglected up to this date, those areas are in more need than we are today. And we saw this as an example when MSD came to us, and it was just a similar example. MSD came because they were talking about a ballot proposal for the April election, I believe it was Prop S. And they had a list by hundreds of projects throughout the district that they cover. Hundreds and hundreds. I think there must have been between 300 and 500. But Wildwood only had 2 line items on the whole list. And that's because they said, we prioritize the areas that need it more. And so we may be penalized because we've done such a good job in this city, taking care of our roads. And then, you know, this municipality is gonna say, well, we've got this other area that needs more help than you right now. And so that's where I see we will have an impact, because we're competing now for resources all in the same pool.
Well, the entire Public Works Department goes away.
Yeah. but that's-
In the merger, as the proposed merger, as it once existed.
So you would say municipal services and then parentheses like
Public, yeah, your
Like
your
streets,
roads, streets, yes. that
snow
was-
removal,
Streets, snow, trash, which, trash, I'm sure will get a lot of
Sidewalk repair,
attention.
road repair.
Sidewalks, I mean, that's a great
Yeah.
road
advantage we have.
repair.
We're out, you know, we're replacing slabs now. We are replacing sidewalks. We are
Trash
putting in
recycling,
ADA places at intersections. All of that falls under Public Works.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
We're
my-
doing the Manchester Road streetscape. We're replacing the deck over Highway 109.
Yeah. So would you call that public works or
That's
municipal
called Public Works.
services?
It all falls underneath Public Works.
Okay,
And that whole department, that
Public
entire
Works.
department
Yeah,
would
you
go
can
away.
Put Public Works and then in parentheses.
have that other
All those items to bring. It might just help to round that, because that is one
No, I think
of
that's a
those
really,
items
that's a
that
really
could
good
be
point.
impacted.
Public works as opposed to municipal
As
services.
so calling it public works and then like parentheses, street
That's
repair,
right.
snow removal, trash,
Sidewalks.
recycling, sidewalks, okay.
I have a question.
Molly, I'll make a note and I will send you, I have a document that talks about what Public Works does.
Okay.
So I'll send that to you.
Okay. Okay. Sidewalks, okay. And I can just add that and send it back to, I could just send it back to Will and Steve if you guys want me to. What did you say, Joe, on at the very opening paragraph. They proposed a St. Louis ballot initiative, is that what you called it?
They proposed a statewide ballot initiative regarding, proposed a statewide ballot initiative to merge St. Louis City and county.
Okay.
Or
To
statewide is key there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's where.
St. Louis City and County that could have fundamentally changed, okay.
Right.
So you're saying Better Together proposed a statewide ballot initiative to merge St. Louis City and County that could have fundamentally changed many of the blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
I can add that.
Yeah.
Or could we say that would have? fundamentally
would.
changed?
I think we should
Well,
say
so-
could have, because
Okay.
we don't know what it would have done.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, I think that, in fact, that's a word I tweaked. I said, Will, I said, I think we should change would, could,
I think
because,
it's fine, it makes it more neutral. I mean, I
yeah,
don't-
I just think we
It
need to
is more
remain
neutral.
neutral. You know, we
Absolutely.
want to avoid words like adverse and,
Threatens
you
to,
know,
yeah.
just, you know, like, just, you know, we,
I think for the purposes of the survey, this is
Yeah.
right. I think
Yeah.
that if for collecting information, stay
Yeah.
neutral as possible. I think in the
Yeah.
other communication that the city puts forth, the action of the council is to abjectly state that it is an adverse action to which we are opposed
Mhm.
unanimously as a city, right? So in that case, the council voted
right.
completely in favor. And so if we're communicating the position on it, that's fine. I think in a survey, staying more neutral makes a lot of sense.
Because there are people out there that are not the initial merger as it was proposed. I've not spoken to anybody who's in favor of what was proposed.
Mhm.
But I've spoken to a lot of people who are in favor of some kind of a merger. You know, the fact of the matter is, you know, not everybody is against this idea.
And if it's new, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, so we don't
No,
want
that's
to
all right.
offend, you know, we don't want to
So
hold us
I-
and load it,
yeah, I'm
you know,
not
we
trying
want to
to-
be neutral, so.
All right, so I think just the assembly of this commission says, no, we're not neutral. We're here for a reason.
Yeah.
Not to be neutral, we're here for a purpose. So I don't think we ought to go too neutral.
Right.
One thing I think that we might want to consider a little more here is to, in a subtle way, identify this top list anyway, in each one of these, as areas that would have, under the proposal that was put forward, that was going to go to ballot. I think there are certain areas that were unmistakably going to be affected as a result of that ballot initiative, right? And just kind of subtly kind of guide that to show, so these are kind of the areas that could have been affected, could
Yeah,
a good thing, but,
Yeah.
so they're thinking, oh, wow, yeah, as Joe had indicated, you know, the public works,
Yeah.
you know, and all these very important areas to us. I'm just wondering if we could just kind of guide that a little more to get people thinking, oh, that would have been gone, or that would have been affected.
Or what would have happened to
Right.
that? Something could have
Well,
happened.
and I don't disagree with the neutral position, but I still think, you know, we did come here for a reason, you know.
No, and that was, and Pat, you're absolutely right. And if you remember back to one of our very first meetings when our city attorney, Mr. Young, was here, there's nothing wrong with this group putting out an informational piece that said, if this merger went through as proposed, these
Right.
are the kinds of things that would negative or impact the city of Wildwood. So just saying that, it's not saying, hey, we're against it or whatever, we're just
Right.
saying, public works would go away, planning and zoning would go away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's okay to say that.
So
It's okay,
that,
it's
should we
absolutely-
say it here? My feeling is say that we should be more forthcoming and say, these things go away.
Well, you're absolutely
You think
right.
it could have
And
been
again, if this is to be an
This is,
informational
saying,
document.
yeah. All right, this is not saying that. This is saying what do you like, don't like, and what is most important. But it's not getting to the point saying, planning and zoning now goes away from local control to this new master city. Same thing for the police, public works. Do we want
Yeah, how
to
would
try
you-
to
So that's
Say
what I was
something
getting at,
here.
is maybe to position that more of, here's the areas that could have been affected under the proposal.
Yeah.
And still go by the,
Yeah, this is
what's
good.
rank of what's most
Yeah.
important to you, and kind of use that focus to say, as they look through this and they're scoring it, and that'll give them more information about, oh, wow, we would,
This could have gone, I think just the nature that we put it out, like, again, in the bottom it says, as we work to, go like to the middle of the first paragraph. As we work to protect the many unique elements of our community from the potential effects of future initiatives, we'd like to understand your prioritization of these assets. I think that right there in itself says, all of these things could be impacted,
If you'd like, Molly, what I can do is give you some language that we've used, saying, okay, I literally have an art chart where, as it exists now, and then big red X's through what goes away. So I can provide in verbiage and say, okay, here are the things that, that would be impacted or that would disappear under proposal that you could incorporate perhaps in the second paragraph, leading before you get into questions 1 through 5. Would that help you?
Well, I think we have to remember too, though, that it has been, it has been rescinded,
Do what?
The initial merger proposal has been taken off the table, probably because it was too invasive and strong. That's fine. I think we want to keep, I feel like the survey is getting wordy. If surveys are wordy, people don't take them.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Oh, I was just suggesting just some
Yeah.
subtle changes, like,
So you're saying reword maybe question 1?
like for, could fundamentally change be fundamentally eliminate many of the service provided by, because there was certainly going to be that, eliminate's not an over,
Pejorative?
yeah, exactly, word. It was going to eliminate our abilities to control many of these services, so. That's all, it was just some subtle changes to make it a little more.
A little bit more direct.
A little more
Yeah.
direct, and obviously the city's
So
intent
that
to try to.
people fully understand that we'll possibly lose this, and this.
So, and then the sport, what is important to you? What are the?
Yeah, right,
important-
right.
Yeah,
What's
definitely keep
important
that.
also to them.
You're saying keep the ranking then?
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think that, just
Yeah.
some subtle changes on that.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
So if people come back saying they don't care about local control, that tells us something,
Yeah, right,
It tells us not important.
yeah.
So let me try this
I don't
one out
think
for a
that'll
second.
happen, but I'm saying.
What if we reworded that entry sentence to this? In January, an organization called Better Together proposed a St. Louis County proposed a statewide ballot initiative to merge St. Louis County and city that could have eliminated many of the services provided by local government and fundamentally changed the way in which they are provided.
Okay, that's perfect.
What if we said eliminated and/or fundamentally changed? Because like schools aren't going to be touched. I don't want to set off a panic storm over the schools.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'll add too,
Agreed.
merger, if you ask them, they're gonna say, we don't eliminate, they're not eliminating, they're gonna provide you still with the
Yeah.
same, the services, they just may not be the level of
Yeah,
expectations
that's a
that we
good
have
point.
today.
Well,
So
what
we
I'm
lose
saying here,
our
we change
local
government
control.
to-
Yeah, that would
We
be
lose the local control.
locally managed or
Yeah.
locally.
Yeah, local, it says local.
It says local government.
Yeah, then, yeah, you're good there.
But
I think-
locally managed, I'd say.
Yeah, I think we're getting down to the point, is it tomato or tomato?
Yeah.
I think the thing is really,
I
pretty
think
good.
we need to be careful not to set off like a panic, is I think what I'm saying. Things aren't, oh my God, we're not gonna have trash removal anymore, or what's gonna happen to the schools, or, what's gonna happen to the police. People like, fire, for example, was not gonna be touched in this,
No, but I wouldn't, I understand where you're coming from. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to get too neutral on it because police absolutely would have been affected. And the per capita policing that we're used to is not what the rest of the county is used
Right.
to. And so some of that absolutely would have changed. So
Yeah.
not to be alarmist, but at the same time, let's not,
Okay.
I don't want to take the
I
team
don't
down
want to take too,
completely.
exactly.
But you know what?
That's all I was going for.
Just make it a little bit more
Surveys-
pointed.
And
surveys-
Yeah.
police and, yeah.
Okay,
surveys gather all kinds of information, so, you know, we've got specific, but you have additional comments down here. So
Yeah, that's
if somebody
true.
comes and says, well, wait a minute, is this going away, this going away, this going away?
Right.
You know, and then we see that. I mean, this gives us an opportunity to further educate if we see that there's misinformation out there or something. So we'll be gathering that
Yeah,
information.
because there are 3 places that people can put comments.
Right.
I think we definitely, I'm totally happy to revise a little bit. I don't want to make it any wordier because, you know,
No.
surveys do have to be like,
I think we're talking about a few word
Yeah,
changes here,
okay.
nothing.
So.
that's fine, that's
City,
fine.
I'm picking up a merger because the language before that I have written down, that's not saying. So merger that could have eliminated and or fundamentally changed many of the services provided by local government.
Yeah,
You have the word could, so it is fair to.
and
Could.
or.
Now, if you read the
Okay.
proposal, would, but.
Yeah, would, and would that be the right word?
But could is, I like could because it is neutral, and again, we're information gathering, but I think that achieves, I
Okay.
think that, does that achieve
Yeah,
that?
so you're saying the
Yeah, that's
person.
fine, just a little more, yeah.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, in January, an organization called Better Together proposed a statewide ballot initiative to merge St. Louis City and County that could have eliminated and/or fundamentally changed many of the services provided by local government and the way that they were provided.
I would put a period after government, strike, and the way they were provided.
Okay. Government, boom, out.
And can I ask one more thing?
Yeah.
Can we actually title it or put something regarding merger in here?
Sure.
We call it something, I mean, maybe resident survey, city-county merger. I mean, just something at the top identifies what it's about.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
What would we call it?
Consolidation?
I would
Say
say
Wildwood,
this
Missouri.
merger initiative.
What's that?
There's something that, yeah.
Merger
City county
initiative
merger.
survey?
Merger,
I think
people have heard that verbiage, and they
Yeah.
would recognize what we.
Merger initiative resident survey?
I think that's good. I think you'll probably end up getting more results
Yeah, right.
when people see the word merger.
Merger, okay.
Yeah.
City-county merger initiative.
City-county merger initiative survey.
That's
Love it.
familiar.
There we go.
Okay.
So this survey, will this be available through the website or
Yes.
is it by
City,
email?
county,
Through
merger
the
initiative
website.
survey.
I'll talk to Kathy to find out what various ways we can get this into the hands of the
Okay.
residents.
Yeah, the only thing I can just wonder is, you know, when you put it out there, an open survey on the website, you know, anyone can fill it out, even people outside of Wildwood.
Well, if you do a Survey Monkey, though, that would be based on going to people who are known to us.
Yes, if you do that.
And that was the
means-
intention, was to do a Survey Monkey.
Yeah, that means that they've signed up with us. I mean,
Right.
still, anyone could sign up. Where I was getting to is that if you put it on a public site, you can get a group of people who are proponents, and they send it out to their distribution list and say, hey, go fill out the survey, and then our results are all skewed.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know.
So no, the intent was the Survey Monkey.
So when we send it out, we have at least somewhat control. Someone can't repeat
And that's-
fill it out 10 times.
Right, the e-news, like,
Yeah.
I get this e-newsletter from Wildwood.
Mm-hmm.
So that, is that what you're talking about? Like, how will people know to go to the website and fill this thing out?
Well, the author of the e-newsletter is sitting right behind you, so you may want to
There's
weigh in
Joe.
there.
Hi, Joe. So we could put it on that?
We could certainly advise
Okay.
our subscribers that if they want to go to the website,
Okay,
find the survey.
find the survey. Another thing I thought of was, we could reach out to trustees of the subdivisions to
Yeah.
put them out to their residents.
We have a closed Facebook group
Yeah, so
that
do
we
we.
could send out to. Send the link, I can post it, yeah.
Yeah. So is
In
that
my
something we could do
subdivision.
too?
Well, you now know the
You do?
trustees, right?
What's that?
You have
Oh,
to-
yeah. That list had a lot of people, my own subdivision, where the trustees weren't even listed. But, you know, if we could just
Oh, that's a great idea, yeah, this,
get trustees to
every
send them
subdivision,
out.
I'd be shocked
Almost all of them have newsletters themselves.
if,
Yeah.
or Facebook groups.
Yeah.
Closed Facebook groups, or
Just out of curiosity, how much would it be to mail a card to every resident? I mean, just out of curiosity. Well, this is more than a card though, isn't it? I mean, what is is that $30,000 cost? Or what is it?
That sounds like a lot.
I was gonna
Less
say,
or more?
Direct mail piece should be that expensive.
It should not be the expense, number one, but number two, I'd like to avoid expenses if we can.
Yeah.
Well, I know, I was just curious
It
how
would be
much,
a lot of
because I
money.
mean, if we sent something to every, I mean, we would have, it wouldn't be, you know, we would know what the response rate is, we would know a lot of data, you know, how many people responded to it, and we would know that everyone responding lived in Wildwood.
Steve, we put out the newsletter. What's the frequency of the newsletter?
The Gazette,
Yes.
twice a year, and so we have one that'll be coming out in the first week of August. That's the fall edition. I mean, literally the deadline for articles is tomorrow, so we're working on that right now.
Would be some way to include in that. I mean, that's already direct.
That would be
could do
your
that.
best direct approach.
You know, put something like this inside of one of the Gazettes?
And the deadline, that's tomorrow.
Well, that's
That's already-
okay. I mean, you know, yeah, the deadline is, but it's like anything else. I mean, there's lots of articles to be written and so forth, so.
Oh, I mean, I could have this revised to you.
But, yeah, I mean, we're okay,
Tomorrow.
don't worry about it. I mean, tomorrow, next week, there's a lot of articles, there's still a lot of open spaces, you know, to be filled yet, so don't worry about any kind of deadlines. But the point is, that's a great suggestion to
Yeah,
include this.
that sounds good, I think.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Point them to the website survey.
Then, you know, you sent out 30,000,
Mhm.
and you got back 10,000 or
Mhm.
something.
Will, do you think that it would be advisable for us to take some time on these farmers market and at the concerts where a couple of us are there with a little sign on a little table, saying the same thing? We have face-to-face contact with people.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'd be.
City already have a table at the
Do I?
events? City already have a table at those events?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
I thought I heard you say that.
They do it at the concerts, at the farmers market. Do we have a booth at the farmers market?
We don't, but we have the right to have a booth or as many booths as we want.
Mhm.
I just think it'd be a good idea. I mean, I'd be available some Saturday mornings to
Yeah.
spend some time.
You
Mhm.
could do that.
And people would be interested, and they would ask questions, and you can go into more detail, then we could put in one of those surveys.
And you get, I think you get an ear corn for every survey that gets completed.
That's a lot of corn.
That's a lot of corn.
So just to make sure we reach everybody, if we distribute this via the Gazette, e-newsletter, and then we have paper copies available at events, I think that's very available.
Should I add something at the very bottom that says to take the survey online, please visit the City of Wildwood website with like the link?
Mhm.
Okay, like cityofwildwood.com?
Well, I would have to get you that link and talk to Kathy.
Well, I could just leave that, like, please visit, and you could add it.
We can get you, you know, so that would go right to there, so.
Yeah.
So while you're tweaking the language and
Yeah.
doing some of this other stuff, I can get that information, Joe and I can get that.
Then I would encourage that as quickly as possible after we have the results, say we closed it in September or after our last major event, then we publish out as an informational piece again to the city what the results of the survey were. And here's the things that you ranked, here's the results of what we had. Because again, that's a secondary informational piece, and provided that the results are what we expect they will be, it'll reinforce the point, I believe.
Yeah, great. Is there any reason not to ask for maybe name and email address as an optional? I mean, why is there any reason that people would, I mean, they don't have to be an optional thing, but,
What will we do with that?
well, I don't know. I mean, do you solicit, does the city solicit name or email, to communicate to the residents, email addresses for those that are willing to give them to you?
I'm going to ask Mr. Boonage, since that falls under his purview.
If you're a subscriber on our website, so you get notifications, obviously.
Right, you have to give
have
that.
your email addresses. We had an incident earlier this year where it's public record, it's public information, so if there's a request for it, we have to provide it. And we've gone now to advising people of that circumstance. So some people are a little skittish about, oh, you're giving out my email
Yeah.
to other parties.
Right.
And that's the nature of government, we can't say no.
Yeah, I understand. Because that might be another method to reduce the, people submitting 20, surveys or people from even outside of Wildwood.
Well, we could do this, could we have like a mailer to people where they can send it in and keep those, could we put it in the Gazette and give responses and then have that pool of data and know that those responses came from that outreach and then continue with the other as well, but just segregate that data, know that, okay, we sent out 30,000 and we had 10,000 respond, then over the, so we know what that kind of response rate is, and then as we proceed and the universe grows, we just know that this data set came from that effort, and then that keep some of the analytics.
Well, I suppose what you could do, perhaps, is maybe somewhere on this document, if you're trying to find out, how did you see the survey?
Yeah.
The Gazette, Farmers Market, City Concert, something like that.
There you go.
If that's what you're asking, I think, what do you think, Molly?
Sure.
In case we want to know later on, if we're collecting data, we might be helpful to know where it came from.
I agree.
I don't know.
It may, a lot of people may leave it blank, but then again, maybe a lot of people fill it out, perhaps.
I don't know. I'm overthinking it.
Yeah,
It's easy to do, right?
Yeah.
Getting data.
So you're saying the Gazette, the Wildwood Gazette,
Newsletter.
Yes. Wildwood Gazette.
e-newsletter,
Community event.
community event. Are those the three things?
I think so.
Yeah,
We're good.
okay.
What about Survey Monkey? Is that separate?
Well, so that would be, like, how did you obtain this survey? From the Survey Monkey is like the means to take the survey,
Yeah.
really.
So those would be by default.
Probably from the
automatically.
e-newsletter. Maybe we should say subdivision communication from subdivision? Or do we want to even go there with the subdivisions?
I don't see why not. I'm certainly.
Well, are
willing to
we
put it
making
out.
it a multiple choice, or are we just leaving it blank? How did you hear about this, and then let people fill it in? Or were you?
I would-
or
I
you-
may not fill it
Or
in.
you do check box?
Just check boxes
Okay.
and just list out all the different options, so.
That you could,
you know,
okay.
You could fill it out through subdivision trustees.
Subdivision communication or
neighbor,
something.
Other,
Okay.
As many, I think, that
Yeah.
options that you could think of. But
Okay.
yeah, then you really do get it to the point where if you put too many questions, they're just
Yeah.
gonna immediately get turned off. I mean,
Yeah.
they only spend a few seconds initially looking at it, and if there's a lot of words,
Yeah.
they will ignore it.
Right.
So I think the percentage has got to be something, between 10 and 20%, I think.
That'd be a
If
good
I recall, I looked at, probably about 10% or something
Yeah.
like that.
But that would be a great cross-section of
Yeah.
the city.
And if because that's about to go out. So, I can send it back to you tomorrow morning.
okay.
And at the end, everybody reads the results. That's
Mhm.
where you really get, I guess, the benefit.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the survey, or we?
Let's move it along.
Yeah.
Very well.
We're running late.
We got through pretty well on
I
time.
don't like to get too pigeonholed into a certain subject like that.
Any miscellaneous items?
I do have a comment on miscellaneous items, and it's just a follow-up to the discussion we had with Dr. Terry Jones And he was cautioning us against getting too diffused in our efforts and trying to identify what our priorities are. And he listed off some things that we could focus on, and maybe this is a good content for our next meeting, but I think we really do need to identify what our priorities are, what we think they are, and then what our top priorities are. Where do we really want to push? And if we focus on our top one or two, I think we can be more effective than if we spread it out over 5 things and we really make no impact. So perhaps we could put that on the agenda for next meeting.
Okay. And then as far as the date for the next meeting?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
may I make a suggestion? I'm just going to throw this out to the group. We've been meeting since its inception, so this is at least 2 months now or something along those lines. Every 2 weeks. Given this slowdown, if you will, of the Better Together initiative, do you think, as a commission, that perhaps maybe going to a monthly basis, maybe we don't perhaps need to meet every 2 weeks now? We can always communicate if something comes up, but I mean, other than today's announcement, I mean, there's been nothing, as I said earlier, in the media. I think Andy's suggestion about focusing on a couple priorities, but I'm just going to throw that out to the group that most of the committees, all of the committees, they meet on a monthly basis. We were doing it on a much more frequent basis just to get traction and going. And I'm wondering if perhaps if you all feel that we might be at that point to where 2 weeks maybe at this point isn't necessary, but it's just a suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Just that we're a super special committee, Steve. No. I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. In that vein, would like to pick a predictable day or week and day, that way we can calendarize it and go forward. I know, Molly, you on the 4th Thursday, right, have a conflict?
All right, Thursday's fine for me.
Yeah.
Tuesdays are not, Wednesdays are bad.
Thursday?
Third
Yeah,
Thursday of the
Tuesdays
month?
are tough, yeah.
Tuesdays are tough for council members.
Tuesdays, Mondays, and, well, alternating Mondays at least, and then Tuesdays
Yeah.
first.
Third Thursday of the month?
I think we should aim for that.
What is the third Thursday of July?
Yeah.
I will not be available on the 3rd Thursday.
Be July 18th.
July?
A second Thursday would be okay,
Second Thursday.
I'm fine with
which is
second
about a
Thursday.
month, right?
Mhm.
That's the second Thursday would be 4 weeks from now.
Yeah,
I
okay.
can make that one.
July 11th.
Okay. July 11th, yes.
Along the lines of what you're saying, Andy, I think as we narrow down and then start to prepare what our findings are in some formalized fashion to document what our report outs are, is going to be useful. With that, unless there's any other items,
So are we saying the second Thursday of the month is kind of the
Second.
official?
second Thursday of the month.
What,
So it's in July,
July 11th will be the next one.
Then August 8th.
Any other miscellaneous items? Very well, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Andy, second.
second.
Second from Paul, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm so used to
I know.
It's the first time
Liaison.
Steve, you want me to hand one of these out to everyone?
Love your shirt.
or- I mean, they're all copies of the same thing.
Oh, they are?
Well, there's 2 here.
But there's multiple aspects.
Yeah, really. I'm going to Germany next week.
We'll ask them if they want a hard copy.
Really?
Check with them before they ask.
That's where we're going. We're doing Nuremberg and Budapest.
We did the
So
opposite.
once you get this out,
Hard copy of what?
when will this actually hit the?
You were gonna let it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When will the questionnaire actually hit the, site and everything? When do you think that?
We went early
I mean,
from state to
what I'm gonna do,
Okay.
what I'm gonna do,
Here we went Viking down.
I was just trying to stop the live stream.
You
Once I
did
get the
which
final
one?
product,
We
I'm
did
gonna run it by the
the
city
DNU.
attorney.
Okay.
Just to make
We
sure.
are
Sure,
doing
sure.
the
I just wanna take a look at it, he can turn it around. So I mean, literally, I mean, within
Both
a
of
week
them?
or
You're
less.
getting a long one
I mean,
then.
and I'll talk to Kathy or
Oh,
Nat.
nice.
So we, the website and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that, just kind of like.
Okay. Survey monkey and everything?
Yeah.
You're doing a
Okay.
combination.
Something like that.
The Danube, you're gonna love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it.
We had a friend.
Yeah, you bet.
About 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Sorry, went long.
Oh, my goodness.
Keep me away from home.
They were busted. The same water, too high.
You don't think I'd get out of some of the bridges? Yeah, we had the opposite problem 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
well,
I'll be able to tell you about
The river
it.
was
Okay.
low,
next time you
and
see
at
me.
one
We were
point,
working about that
Yeah.
and doing it in July.
We're going to Ireland
But
this
now
August,
we're
but
worried
not
about, I
with,
mean,
The
the rivers will not be low
when
enough.
we
We don't want to
Thank
get bust,
you.
because that just sort of ruins the whole thing.
we had to bus around the low spot and go on to the bridge. So, but you know what?
Oh, was it a pain?
Thank you.
Yeah, it means packing,
I think you two
unpacking.
different
That was
ones.
the only, it just, you know, they just said, pack your things, leave them in your room. And we went about our daily, like the tours we were doing, and we ended up just on this bus in the German countryside. We got to an identical ship, and literally, I just, straight to our room, same room, luggage was there, it was not,
okay.
it was totally okay, yeah.
We're hoping
Yeah.
that it won't happen.
I did not know.
I've got, and when making a reservation,
He was on commissions that I.
That's for the spring team.
Oh, okay. They say,
But, I mean, I heard a lot of
Or-
Joe and so forth.
they say you might be blessed because of the road.
Yeah.
They never mention about the.
The height, right.
Well,
Well, and you do go under a lot of, these are ancient bridges that are not very high, you know, you go under these very low bridges.
which road category did you
We
get?
had the little, not where you could,
Oh, you had a balcony with chairs on?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's what we had.
All right, we went one down, which is a full window.
Yeah.
With let's say, a sliding door, but it doesn't have a balcony.
If-
We thought that we're not gonna.
You would, you won't, if we go again, that's the room we'll get, because you want, because when you're out on the balcony, like from your own room, you're only seeing one side. We found ourselves wanting to be up top,
The city of Wildwood.
on the top deck, so you can see everything.
Well,
So we were never even in our room.
that is something else I wondered about. And we are going from to Amsterdam.
council rejected?
It's true, I appreciate
So
it.
that most of the towns, are they on the one side versus the other? Or
No.
it's both?
It's both,
Is
it's
it
both. I wouldn't say there's one better side or the other. And like I said, you're gonna find yourselves up in on the upper deck and in the dining like area where you can just see everything. You don't wanna be, because you know, like when we would be sitting drinking coffee like on our own little personal balcony, I'd be like, oh, this is so pretty. Gosh, I wonder what's on the other side that we're missing right now, you know? So I would totally, you got the right room. That's what I will do
Would you?
next time. Yes, 100%. I kind of feel like we wasted a little money because we were never out on it. Because I'm like, well,
But our friends told us that the food was great.
oh my God.
People were very friendly.
Everywhere.
Because it's a small group, you know.
Yeah, it's less than
Oh, it isn't like a
200.
5,000 people on an ocean cruise.
It's 200, it's 200
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
And, oh, you're gonna love it.
At the end of the day, they are.
Oh, it's the
Food.
first time
represent
doing it.
citizens
Yeah.
of the city,
Yeah.
within
They're
their
gonna
ward,
love
and
it.
quite honestly, the entire
Yeah, a
city.
friend of mine's on
not just
Rhine
their
right
ward,
now.
that They are there to
Well,
do
yeah, so
what is
hers
best
went
for the
from
city.
So,
Nuremberg.
does she have a
Those
floating
folks
spot?
Are doing what is
And
best.
she hasn't said anything.
They
She's
are
on it now.
Oh, she's on it,
But she keeps
yeah.
posting
For them
pictures
and their agenda,
on Facebook. She hasn't said
whatever they
anything
may
about
be.
flooding
And
problems.
and
Yeah,
so,
these
I,
friends
it
of ours
just
left
frustrates
on
me
May
that their
24th.
residents, their
Okay.
constituents.
And they were gonna,
Don't see what they're doing.
Yeah.
8 days.
And, I mean, my wife, when I went home Monday night after council and told her.
How many
Oh, I'm not
times?
sure how many times.
So we just had the one
Can't you just
afternoon.
get rid of them? I said,
They
"No,
have
I'd
to
like to
bust
let
at
people
least
and
twice.
let people,
Okay.
can vote them out twice.
Yeah,
I
that
was
kind of
the
takes
last
away
committee
from
I
what
was
you're,
on, Commissioner. I was
you're
on
not
as a
booking
charter.
What are you
a
paying
bus
for?
tour. Right, right.
Yeah.
But with ours, we just had to be, oh, thank you. It was just, oh, and this is your thing. We just had to be bus, thank you.
Particularly Greg.
Just that one. So it wasn't bad at all.
So,
And even Budapest is just, that was my
we
favorite
are
part.
going one day early. We're going another day. But it's
Well,
that
you
day,
heard Joe
we
Gargano
want
say
it
that he
in
was chairman of the admin at
plus, I
PW.
said,
Okay, and
next
which I
day.
sit on. And,
Oh, it's-
I mean, that is one. of the
We are
things that
spending
is,
2
here.
extra
And
days
Tim Werther is
when
not.
we dock
Okay,
in
but we'll meet him.
Amsterdam.
Okay.
So we're gonna spend
And
that day.
You're gonna love it.
observe, that's one
And the
thing.
food is
People come and he will
amazing.
just sit
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
And
they
he
say
starts
you
running,
can
and he
have
starts
the
directing
American
me and other
or
staff, you do this,
or
send me
the
this, whatever,
American
you know.
food.
And then,
Or else
I
the
mean,
local
Joe had,
cuisine.
so Joe talked with, and so we had the last meeting.
You're gonna
a week
love it.
ago,
Tribal.
in the
Yeah.
chambers.
There's no shortage of
There's
food.
no shortage, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
But that is anomaly true.
And
Yeah.
I said, that son of a
It's
bitch didn't actually
amazing.
come up on the dais
So
and
much
sit
fun.
down in the chair. And I mean, just looked at him and went, are you kidding me? That instead of sitting, he thought, well, he'll sit in the audience. Ooh, he waltzed up there like he was, I'm surprised he didn't walk over to Garrett Town and say, could you move, I'll take him, I mean, that guy is just.
Terrible, just terrible.
It's
I got
incredible.
off of the city council because of Shay.
Yeah.
I just would not associate with people of that ilk.
Well.
And Greg Nani and.
Yep.
Boy, really sad, but. Okay, see you later.
See ya, Jack, take care.
Okay.
Did it seem to work
Hmm?
out? Did it seem to work out for you?
I don't know. I know that, I constantly saw spinning going on
Yeah.
here, and I would, try to refresh and so forth. One time my screen went totally blank, and but the lights were on, so I rebooted, and it came back to and so I stopped it. I don't know, all right, so I don't know what this means,
Well,
Oh.
you're still recording, so if you'll hit stop there.
here.